In lesson 1-6, we'll be learning how to multiply and divide integers. So far we've been adding and subtracting, and now we'll be multiplying and dividing. So when we read the key concept, it says the product of two integers with different signs is negative. So basically, if you have a negative and you are multiplying and there's only one, okay, so notice there's just one, 2 times -5. Well, if you have an odd number of negatives, your answer will be negative. Okay, so as soon as I see the negatives here, I usually circle them, and then I know my answer will be negative, and then I just do 2 times 5 is 10 and put a negative on. Okay, so again, I have one negative, so that means my answer will be negative. 5 times 2 is 10, -10. So again, there's one negative, so I know the answer is going to be negative 32. There's one negative, so there's negative 35. All right, now the product of two integers with the same sign is positive. So again, I don't have any negatives, so therefore I know it's going to be positive. 2 times 5 is 10. Now here I have two negatives, and 2 is an even number. Okay, and so any even number of negatives, we'll have a positive. So 2 times 5 is 10. So we might want to write that down somewhere. Even number of negatives equals positive. Okay, odd number of negatives equals negative. All right, so let's look at this problem here. We have two negatives. Okay, 2 is an even number, so we know it's going to be positive 64. Okay, you could put a little plus there. You knew at the beginning it was going to be a positive number. Again, two negatives, so you know it's going to be a positive. 12 times 12 is 144, and we know the answer is positive. All right, so here, right away, I have two negatives, so I know the answer is going to be positive. Okay, which property could we use? It says here. Well, you know, rather than doing 6 times 2, okay, and then maybe doing a positive times a negative, basically what this is asking here is I could do my two negatives together first to get rid of my negatives. But I guess I always just like counting them right away, and then it doesn't really matter what order you do the multiplication in. It's really easy to double numbers, and that's what we do when we multiply by 2. So I would do the 6 times the 4 first. I would do 6 times 4 times 2, and then this would be 24. Then we have times 2, and that would be 48. And notice how I didn't even pay attention to the negatives because I told myself right at the beginning of the problem that my answer was going to be positive. And after you figure that out, you don't even need to worry about your positives and negatives because you already know what the answer is going to be, and then you just work out the multiplication. So how would we do a problem like this in our book for our assignment? Well, the first thing you would need to do is copy the problem. So we do 6 times -2 times -4. Then I would prefer to see you circling your negatives. There's 2, and put a little plus over here. Okay, and then you can, if you want to rewrite it, you can. Otherwise, you can just kind of go like this if you want. Okay, and then you can do 24 times 2. And then you can do 48. So as long as you underline and tell me which ones you're doing, again, I always like doubling with bigger numbers rather than do 6 times 2 is 12, and 12 times 4. Yeah, it's still pretty easy. So however you want to do it, you can. All right, so now dividing. So the first few examples there, we were multiplying. Dividing has the same rule. So odd negatives equals negative, and even, change colors here so we can see it, and even negatives equals positive. Okay, so it's just counting the number of negatives here. Okay, so we just go, all right, well, I have 1, so my answer is going to be negative. And then 30 divided by 5 is 6, and I know it's going to be -6. How would you do this in your homework? Well, obviously you have to copy it. So 30 divided by -5. Then I would expect to see you circling that and telling yourself as a reminder that it's going to be negative, then you can just say -6 is your answer. So Here's your problem in your book. What do? You write negative 27 divided by negative 9. Okay, it's good to put this in parentheses since we don't want two symbols next to each other. Okay, then I would expect you to circle your two negatives, and your answer then is going to be positive. So 27 divided by 9 is 3, and that's your answer. Okay, so what will we do for homework? Well, first thing you need to do is copy the problem. So 3x minus negative 4y. Okay, and now we need to substitute. So it's really important here, since we're substituting with negatives, to put in parentheses. So 3 times x is negative 10, and we're minus negative 4. I'll put this in parentheses, negative 4. Okay, now do this step by step. I know some of us are looking at this and we start seeing, and oh, right here, okay, don't do that first. This is subtraction. You have to do your multiplication and division first, okay? So I have multiplication division right here. I have multiplication or division right here. You have to do that first. Leave your subtraction for later. All right, now here I have one negative, so I know my answer is going to be negative 30. Now just bring this down. Subtract. Okay, now I have two negatives, so my answer is going to be positive. All right, 4 times 4 is 16. So now I have negative 30 minus 16. If you want, you can change this to plus negative 16. Now, since they're both negative, now remember our rules from yesterday. Okay, now we're adding or subtracting. We're now multiplying. So you don't just say, oh, I got two negatives, it's going to be a positive. No, it doesn't work that way. I owe 30 and I owe 16. So that means I owe 46. Okay, they're both the same sign. So I add the two numbers together and they keep the same sign. Okay, if we had a number line, here's your negative 30. Okay, and we're going to go that way 16 more. So we're going to subtract 16 further. So we're going to go further left all the way to negative 46. Okay, so make sure you're checking that with your number lines and things. All right, so in golf, Justin scored the following points for a round of 9 holes of golf. Find Justin's average score for the round. Okay, in order to find average, we have to add all of the top numbers and divide by how many numbers there are. So we know that we're going to divide by 9. All right, so we need to do 4 plus 3 plus 0 plus negative 1 plus 2 plus negative 1 plus 2 plus 1 plus negative 1, all divided by, there were 9 holes, so we divide by 9 to find the average. Okay, now I'm going to go through and cross some things out. So I have a negative 1 here. I'm going to cancel that with my 1 right there. Okay, I have a negative 1 and a negative 1. That would be equal to 2, negative 2. So I'm going to cross that 2 out right there. So now I just got rid of all my negatives. So all I have, and then this is a 0, so I can get rid of that. So I have 4 plus 3 is 7. So I can write that right there. 7 plus 2 is 9. All right, so what I'm left with is 9 divided by 9, and that equals a plus 1 score. So he had an average round of a positive 1 for a round of golf. Okay, and then just to go over the concept summary, okay, the product or quotient of two integers with the same sign is positive. The product or quotient of two integers with different signs is negative. Now, again, I'd rather you think of the even number of negatives equals positive, and an odd number of negatives equals negative. That way, you're not just talking about two numbers. You could actually do like negative 1 times 2 times negative 3 times 4 times negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 2 times negative 3 times 4. Okay, now all you got to do is circle your negatives. Okay, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, that's an even number. So I know right now my answer is positive, and now all I got to do is multiply all the numbers together. Okay, it's as simple as that. You just got to count your negatives, and if it's even, it's positive. If it's odd, it's negative. that's our last example for today. Be sure to check the Moodle page for your homework assignment.